Welcome to episode 143 of the How Did It Happen podcast, hosted by Mike Malatesta. In this episode, Mike welcomes Dave Will, the CEO and co-founder of PropFuel, an engagement platform that helps you generate revenue by converting prospects into members and clients, increasing member retention, and winning back lapsed members.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I am really thrilled to have Dave Will with me today. Dave, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, Mike Malatesta. Great, really glad to be here with you. Thanks for having me. I'm flattered.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Thank you.
No, I mean it. This is really, I'm really flattered. Anytime somebody invites me to be a guest like this, which is few and far between, I'm really flattered. So thank you.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. And I also was flattered to be a guest on your podcast earlier after a friend of ours, or maybe sort of a mutual connection. I think it was John Corcoran who introduced the two of us. And John was one of the first people that I ever talked to when I was thinking about starting a podcast. Because I had been talking to a friend of mine, Todd Barden, about it. And for some reason, he and John happened to talk. And he's like, hey, I met this podcaster. You've been talking about it. And, all of a sudden we're connected. He helped me, just get the confidence to get the first one done, Dave. And then later, a couple years later, here he is introducing me to you. And I started listening to Dave's podcast, EO360, and I was just really impressed, not just by the people that he had on, but he's like a very smooth podcaster, and I don't think I'm very
operator
smooth at all. So,
hey, Mike, I gotta tell you though, like you're very humble. Like you are, I mean, and you come across as being kind of like subdued. I think you're an introvert, right? It's my guess.
Yeah, I think I would describe myself that way. Yeah.
Which is pretty interesting to get an introvert to actually do a podcast like this. But you have got this incredible backstory. And if people listening to your podcast don't know your backstory, they need to go listen to it on EO360, Entrepreneurs Organization. That's the interview. That's when I interviewed you.
Right.
You have got this amazing backstory. You've accomplished something that 99.99% of entrepreneurs never accomplish, which is selling this business that you built over time from scratch, nothing, to Mike, forgive me for saying this, a fortune. Like you sold your business for a buttload of money. And I'm not, that's as specific as I'm going to get here. I just want to say, not to say that means you're more successful than everybody else, but dude, you've got an amazing story to tell. If that's all you look at, that right there is just this amazing story. So, and I don't know that a lot of your listeners know that about you. They ought to know that. That's why I said that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's not something that I talk about very often.
That's why I said it, because I know you wouldn't.
Yeah. It was fun to talk about it on your show. So I appreciate you drawing that out, from me when we were talking, Dave, because it felt, you made me feel good about talking about it. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think it's healthy for us every now and then to acknowledge the things that we see as accomplishments, right? And not to say that makes you a better person, nor to say selling a business like that makes you happier, but it's a major accomplishment. And I don't believe things like that are luck. There may be some lucky points, but dude, you made that happen. You wrote your journey. You wrote your book there, and you did a good job, man. It's a bestseller.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you said
that was cheesy.
I used to say that all the time. I used to go, I just got lucky, and this happened, that happened, and yeah, there were definitely these fortuitous interventions or convergences or whatever. But I've begun as I've studied more and more people, I've begun to believe that luck is what people like to tell people happened, because it makes them sound like they didn't work hard or strategize or do the things that most people maybe wouldn't do, and take a lot of hits along the way that hurt. But because it's so I think So I've changed my tune on it a little bit. I'm never going to say that luck has nothing to do with it, but I think it has less to do with it than people might say, because it feels good to say it had a lot to do with it.
Guy Raz always asks that question at the end of how I
Yeah,
built this. He always asks, so was it luck or hard work? And nobody says it was all luck. And nobody says it was all hard work. Most people say it was, there's somewhere on the spectrum.
right.
But here's my philosophy on that. And some people have kind of answered like this much more eloquently. But my philosophy is that we, through fortitude, through endurance, we're creating greater opportunities for luck, more frequent opportunities for luck to rear their head. And so you might say, who's the guy that made the light bulb?
Edison?
Edison. Thank you. So Edison, I don't know how much truth there is to this versus it just
Right.
being a fable, but he tried 1,000 times before he got it right. So was it luck that he found the light bulb, or was it hard work? Well, it was probably a combination of those things. But I think just about every form of success requires endurance, and you're creating lots of opportunities for luck. And it just happens that some people get that luck earlier in the enduring process, and others run across it later. But if you do it long enough, man, you're going to get lucky.
I agree.
So is that luck, or is it fortitude? And I would argue it's a combination of fortitude, hard work, and a little bit of luck.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. I'm glad we got started on that, because it took me away from asking the question I ask everybody, which maybe you were trying to do, but here we go. I ask everybody that the same simple question when I get started, Dave, and that is, how did it happen for you?
So, I mean, there's tons of ways to answer that. I could have just answered it with the luck thing and fortitude and endurance. And I would argue that's a core element of who I am as a person. Is I really enjoy endurance stuff. I'm a marathoner. I've run 54 marathons. And I don't say that to get praise. I say that because, by the way, I got a funny story about that. But I don't say that to get praise. I say that just to paint the picture that it's been a long-term thing. It's not a one-and-done thing. I just really enjoy those endurance things. I've run a few Ironmans. I've done a endurance 50-miler, ultra marathon, they call them. And it's not just the fun. I call them fun. It's not just the sports stuff, but you look at the things where I found success, and it's a 14-year growth, much like yours, growth of a business and selling that in 2015. And now I'm doing it again with a software company. We're 4 years in and we're just turning profitable. These are things that require endurance. And so that's one way I could answer that question. How I made it happen is through endurance. The other way I could answer that would be a little more literally, which is, well, I got fired from my job in 2000 or 2000, what was it, 2000 or 2001, somewhere around there. So I got fired from my job after being told that I lacked a sense of urgency. And in another position, someone told me they encouraged me to walk faster and smile less because perception is reality. And so ultimately, finally acknowledging, and this is my second answer to your question, finally acknowledging my strength, my core values, who I am as a person, I built a business. Because if any job I ever went for, unless I found that perfect job, I was going to get that criticism of, walking too slow, smiling too much, not having a sense of urgency, which is contextual. It's specific to that role and what people are expecting of me. So I ended up building my own business, and I loved it. And I built it around this philosophy of walk slow, smile more. That became the culture of my first business, Peach New Media. And it worked. We built this company. We ultimately got up to about 40 employees, not as big as yours, and didn't get as much of what you sold it for, but ultimately sold it 14 years later for what I'd refer to as, I have a few metrics to determine how much you sell the company for.
Oh, okay,
One,
cool.
one is comfort money, two is lifelong money, and three is FU money. Now, you fall in the category of FU money. I fall in the category of lifetime money. so, it was a little bit better than comfort money, but it certainly wasn't FU money. And so that's the other answer is walk slow, smile more. In fact, if you look behind me, we're on video for those people listening. I have this sign just
Oh,
this
yeah.
year. So this was back in, I came up with this value of mine, like 15 years ago. And just this Father's Day, I've said it so many times to my kids, just this Father's Day this year, my son made me that sign out of driftwood that said, walk slow, smile more.
That's a great sign.
So those are my 3 or 4 answers to your question.
Okay. So a couple of things. Endurance. Where did that come from? Was that something that you had from the time
I could tell you
were
exactly the moment it happened.
Yeah, okay.
Like exactly the moment when I was in, this is just so stupid too. And I wonder how many other entrepreneurs have that moment where it just flipped a switch. But I remember being, and of course it's this one moment piled on with a bunch of other things, right? But this one moment is the one that sticks out to me. Is maybe junior or senior prom, I can't remember which, in high school, but it was high school. After the prom, go to the beach after the prom because it was the thing you do with the girls and the boys, and you just go to the beach and hang out the next day. And I remember taking off my shirt, and I was never an athlete. I was in the marching band. I was short and a little pudgy in high school, and I remember taking off my shirt at the beach, dates there and everything. One of my friends says to me, hey, you call him JD for jelly donut. Like, it's kind of funny actually, because, I was soft in the belly area. And so, I guess it's kind of funny, but to a high school kid in front of the girls where I'm already sensitive about being a little pudgy, it wasn't funny to me. And I shrugged it off. I smirked, I laughed, but in looking back on things, that sticks with me. I'm almost 50 years old, and that sticks with me as one of those moments that sucked, just really sucked. And I think from that point on, and the same is true with my grades. I was always kind of behind my friends in terms of grades. So I look at those moments, and it's not healthy, by the way, Mike. This is not, what I'm describing to is not healthy. But what triggered that sense of endurance is my feeling that I need to prove myself to them, but also to me, to prove that I'm not soft. I'm not a loser. And so it comes from this insecure place, I think, to constantly have to prove to myself. And so, I get out there and I go out for a run, but I got to do it longer and harder some other time. Marathon's not good. You got to do an ultra. Marathon's not good. I got to do a triathlon, like an Ironman. And it's just like, it's not fortunately, I'm transferring it into a healthy activity, as opposed to, one beer is not good enough, I need 20. So okay, sure. At least I'm not turning this into a drinking endurance sport. It's a fairly healthy element, but I think that's where it comes from, the sense of insecurity and having to prove things to people, including myself.
And when people were telling you, at these jobs that you walk too slow and you smile too much, did you interpret that as being kind of similar to the kid at the beach where people were sort of?
I don't think so. I actually took so I was working for SAP, big $1 billion German software company, as an intern when I was in business school, getting my MBA. In between the 2 years, I had this summer internship at SAP. And on my last day, I remember the guy, Mark, my boss, walking me out. He actually put his arm around me, which you can't do anymore today, right. I don't think. But he put his arm around me. He's like, so listen, Dave, I like you, but when you're walking through the halls, I encourage you to walk faster and smile less. But this is the important part. He said, because perception is reality. And so he was sincerely trying to help me. And that's how it's different. He was sincerely trying to coach me and help me the way he thought was best. So it was coming from a good place with Mark. He was sincerely trying to help me become a better employee at a corporation so that I would climb the ladder faster. I don't think that was necessarily the case with my buddies in high school, but and I actually took that advice to walk fast and smile less pretty seriously. And in fact, I went and got another job, and I tried it for 3 years, and yet I got the feedback that I lacked. I couldn't do it. It's like you cannot. What do they say? You can't. Maybe there's so many analogies, but you can't. I guess you could put lipstick on a pig. There's one, but the other one is like I'm a sheep in wolf's clothing. Or wolf in sheep's clothing. Needless to say, like you can't change who you are, and for me to that degree, I don't think to that degree you can't change who you are. One might argue that, but nor did I want to change who I was. I really, especially looking back in life, I really like that element of being a bit of a child inside. I love it. My kids, I can still make my kids laugh. They may be stupid jokes, but I can still make them laugh. So, yeah, no, it wasn't the same as the kids in high school. I think it was coming from a good place. I tried to do it. It just didn't fit me. So fortunately, I found entrepreneurship, which did fit me, like it fit you.
When you, so did that happen when you got fired, Dave? Did you immediately start thinking about, okay, how can I do something on my own that suits me, or where?
So I got fired one day around 10 in the morning, sometime in the morning. Maybe it was even earlier, first thing. And I ended up on the pier in Boston where I was waiting for the ferry to take back home. That's how I got in and out of Boston. And so I'm waiting on the ferry at the pier, and I got like 30 minutes until the ferry shows up. And I remember calling my wife on my, at the time, Nokia phone, I think it was, the one similar to the one in The Matrix. And so I anyway, took it off my belt clip, and I called my wife. And I remember she answered the phone in our new home in a fairly affluent area, South Shore of Boston. And I heard in her arms our baby at the time, Zach, who is now 20. And I heard him, coo in our arms or gurgle or make this sounds babies make when they're kind of just sitting there satisfied. And I couldn't even get a word out. I broke into tears right there on the pier, because it was that moment that I realized, for the first time in my life, I realized at that moment that I was an adult. Isn't that amazing? 30 years old. And this is the first time I actually really felt like an adult. I'd married, a kid, a house, but this moment was the first time I realized I was an adult, because I had other people dependent on me, and I didn't know how I was going to support them. So I went home that day. My wife was just so sweet. Such a huge part of any of my accomplishments. I think my wife is at the core of that. And I went home. She was just so sensitive and delicate, and to my ego when your ego is shot after something like that. Yeah. I just remember being in a daze, like, what the hell just happened? And I'm home at 11 in the morning or 12 in the morning, afternoon. And I remember for some reason just feeling like this is a good time to trim my hedges. So I broke out our hedge trimmer, and I'm like sitting there in a daze trimming the hedges, and I sliced almost off the piece of, like, the tip of my finger. I still have the scar 20 years later. So I go inside. I'm just a mess. I go inside. I'm like, hey, honey, can you drive me to the hospital? Now we're new to town. I'm like, can you drive me to the hospital? I just I just got to get this checked out. It was pretty bad. I was down to
Yeah,
the bone
must have
kind of
been.
thing. So we go to this hospital right here in town because I remember seeing signs for this place called the Pembroke Hospital, the next town over. And we pull up and she pulls up to the emergency sign, and I get out and she's going to go park. And I go up to the front and I go to the lady at Pembroke Hospital. I'm like, listen, I just cut myself. Where do I go? Like, what do I do? And she says, boy, you should go to a hospital. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Where am I? And she's like, oh, this is the Pembroke Psychiatric Hospital. so, so I didn't read the sign close enough, I guess, and we're new to the area. So I got back in the car. I was like, hey, I'll be back. I'll be back for the psychiatric
Yeah, session
part.
later. Yeah, right.
But right now I got to go get my finger taken care of. So I ended up going to the right hospital. So that's my little story of the day I got fired. But to answer, that didn't even answer your question. The question is, did I go right back to work? So a couple of weeks later, I feel like it's a week or two later, I actually had a job offer, a lateral move, doing something very, very similar. And, you should be excited about work. And I know I remember talking to you about this. You had a similar scenario at one point, similar.
Yeah.
I remember getting this job offer. And at first my ego feels good. Like, sweet, I got an offer like a week, two later. And then I got off the phone. I thought about it. And it just gave me this dark pit in my stomach. And so I remember talking to my wife about it. And I was like, I just really don't want to do this. And we talked about it. We talked about the finances and what that might mean. And, like I said before, my wife is just an angel. She's like, you know what? Don't do it then. Find something else. We'll figure it out. And so I didn't. I turned it down. And a week or two later, a friend of mine came to me with an idea. It was a shitty idea. I mean, it was not a good idea. But I was like, sure, let's do it. And that was the origins of this business that ultimately turned into Peach New Media, a learning management system, a software company that I sold 14 years later. So, yeah, man, that's the transition. It took a little bit of courage to turn down an opportunity, and another one popped up. And I think it was, Mike, like 3, 4, 5 years before I was making the kind of money that I would have made if I took that job.
Okay.
But we made it work. And then like I said, 14 years later, the payout showed up, and it was a significant change in our lives when I sold the business. So, besides, I enjoyed it a hell of a lot more. Like, it was something I really enjoy, this idea of building something from scratch and creating value out there out of nothing.
And the responsibility for doing it didn't bother you, like, where before you kind of told what to do, and not, when you work for a company, you're told what to do. Here you're taking a shitty idea, which I don't know how long it took for it to not be a shitty idea any longer, but the responsibility for doing it was yours and your partners, I suppose.
It took about 14 years for it to not be a shitty idea. I mean, okay. Mike, I'm serious. It was
right up to the end. Got it.
It was an evolution, right? So it started as an idea, and then, we took that idea and we're like, what if we did this a little bit differently? And we listen to customers, we hear what customers want, and we see opportunities, and we see voids, and we head towards the void and try to fill it. And then we notice, well, gosh, we don't own this. Wouldn't it be cool if we built something that we owned? And then we go in that direction. So it's this meandering journey. I'm a nerd, and I love things like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, but it's not unlike Frodo's journey to Mordor. It's like this meandering process of just journey. And that's why when I say walk slow, smile more, it's not actually walk slow. I'm not meandering. I'm not walking slow in my life, but what walk slow means is enjoy the journey. And if you're not going into work, I don't want to say every day, but if you're not going to work every week and finding some joy in that journey, it might be a time for a change in your life. Now, every day, nobody enjoys, well, I don't want to say nobody. I don't enjoy my job every day. I would say most days I actually get some sense of enjoyment. And certainly every week I'm enjoying things that I've done. So, it took, and all the way up to when we sold it. We're constantly evolving, looking, listening. We were not funded by choice. It was organic. I ultimately, over the course of time, ended up buying out my original partner, merging with another company, buying out that partner, and ultimately, so I owned 100% when I sold it. Okay. So it was a journey, and it was constantly evolving. And now, in terms of feeling this sense of responsibility, or what I would call freedom, when somebody tells me to do something, what they're not doing is looking at necessarily what I'm good at or what I want to do. They're just saying, this needs to be done, Dave, you do it. What I like about having a business is you kind of focus on your strengths, right? We all have to do some things that we're not really good at, but eventually you hire people to do the things that you're not really good at. And so that's what I enjoyed about having a business is I get to do what I'm really good at, and I let other people do the things I'm not very good at. And what was really fascinating to me is, once I got a number of employees, all of them, give or take, for the most part, were better at what they were doing than I could have done it. I could never have done their jobs better than them, with the exception of a handful here and there. That was the exception to the rule. Yeah, man. So that's my answers are very similar to my journey in building that company. They meander, don't they?
No. Actually, they tell a good story. You. When I was listening to you, you said, I was thinking, well, they also, these people that were doing things that they were better at than you, were also not doing things that you were best suited to do. So you were actually, that's called complementary collaboration. That's called how you move a business forward, by not, by not doing the things that other people can do, provided you're doing something that other people in your organization cannot do to move the needle.
Well, I think what's interesting is, as an entrepreneur, we're the only ones in the company that are trying to make ourselves dispensable.
Right.
We're the only ones. Everyone else has quite the opposite goal, is to make themselves indispensable. I want this company to be completely dependent on me. That's what secures your position, right? But as a owner, as a founder, we're like, man, this company would be worth a lot more, and I'd be a lot happier if I created an organism, a structure, a system that was not dependent on me. That's the last thing you want as an entrepreneur, to have a business that is solely dependent on you. A lot of consulting firms, or small consulting firms, are like that, or some small law firms where they're completely dependent on the primary,
Yeah. Or they're predicated, or they're predicated on being paid by the hour for some
service, right?
You think about, well, how can you possibly scale that up? It's difficult.
I'm not a service guy. I don't know how I don't know, that to me, that would be incredibly frustrating. January 1st every year, to start your driving revenue at zero again. That's why I like software, is because it's an annuity, especially SaaS software, where every year we're just growing on what we've already thrown into the bucket.
Well, I'm glad you said, and maybe it was flippant or not, but that it was a shitty idea until someone wrote you a check that said, "Oh, it's no longer a bad idea."
No,
right?
Even then, it was a shitty idea. We just had people that like shit, I guess. It was.
Yeah.
I'll be more specific. So it was an idea. Let me put it this way: my brother and my father, when I told them about this, I learned this much later. They didn't tell me this, but they would talk to me, and they'd go back on their own and be like, "What the hell is he doing? Like, what is he going to turn that into?" And I didn't know either, but the idea was, we were basically reselling, back in 2000, web conferencing software. That was it. Like we had a deal with Placeware was the name of the company, ultimately bought by Microsoft. We had a deal with Placeware where they would give us the number of licenses for X dollars, and we sold it for X plus 5. And that was it. And then it evolved. We then said, well, we could sell it, but we could also help people manage their team meetings. We could help them manage. And then we turned into webinars. Like when webinars actually weren't even that popular yet, we turned it into these webinars things and managed events. And then it went from managed events into classes, and then went from classes into storing classes online. And then went from storing classes online to building this proprietary or custom websites for storing stuff online. It went from custom websites to creating a standardized platform for storing stuff online. And then now we had a combination of this platform, which was all ours. So now you can see that's the evolution I'm talking about. I could go on with that, but the evolution is going from the shitty idea and turning it into something of actual value to us.
Well, funny sort of corollary to that. My partner, after we'd been in business maybe 3-4 years, I don't remember, but he went from like a small Ford Ranger pickup, which I think is like the bottom of the line Ford, and he got a F-150, sort of all tricked out F-150, and he shows up and he's got a personalized license plate, and it's YSIMBB. And I'm like, well, I was trying to figure out Dave's license plate earlier that he's got hung up on his wall, but so it's YSIMBB. And he's got this big smile on his face. His name is Butch, and he's just a hell of a person.
No idea. I wrote that down. I'm trying to figure out what that might be. No idea.
Nearly impossible. So
is it an acronym?
But he was so happy he'd come up with it because it stands for "Your shit is my bread and butter." And it was it was a perfect description of what we do, because we were in the industrial waste business, and we were basically helping people.
Oh my God, it's literal.
Yeah, right. It's literal. Great. We were basically helping people get rid of their shit. And and there's his pickup truck to prove it, that it can be someone else's bread and butter. So it just reminded me of that when you're talking about
That's funny.
So I know we've talked about this offline, but the arcs of our careers are so similar.
Yours arced a little higher, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's very similar. Start early, you transition through a few partners, you grow, you evolve. But even before that, starts with a shitty job where you got some feedback from leadership that didn't suit you. Build your very, very similar backgrounds, even down to the timeline. How long from the point at which you started to sold your business? What was the time period?
It was 22 years, but at the end it was the same year that you did, 2000.
Yeah, that's funny. That is funny. So you went a little bit longer, but also you built yours to be a little bit bigger. So I suspect at 14 years we might have been similar in size, and then you went another 6, 7, 8 years.
Right. Yeah, it's just really weird, getting. You get called jelly donut. The kids in my neighborhood when I was young called me monkey face, and I don't know that I ever did anything with it, but that's what they called me, and I could never understand why, because I didn't think I looked like a monkey, but they must have thought that I did. And then that's sort of an aside, but then getting fired from a job and then starting. I actually took that job that you didn't take, that one that made you feel like you got to pay your stomach. I took that job for a month. And then
it didn't go so well.
No, it didn't go so well. But anyway, so it's sort of it's just kind of interesting because I don't think I've ever talked to anyone that had such a similar thing. Not that, and there's probably thousands of people out there who have.
Little lead in if you haven't decided to listen to that podcast where I interviewed Mike here, and I'm talking to listeners right now. He walked into the office one day in his first month, and his supervisor boss had thrown all of his papers that were on his desk, thrown them all around the office, just like littered the office with his stuff, because he thought it would be funny. So listen to that story and see how Mike handled that one.
Yeah, I owe him a debt of gratitude. I call him Don the Dick, but I owe
Yeah.
him a debt of gratitude because who
Isn't
knows? I
that
could have been
awesome?
there
Hmm.
for, if he was nice to me, who knows? I could still be working with that guy, just doing
Yeah. Imagine that.
whatever it was. So, I want to talk a little bit about the ultra marathons, Dave, because I don't
Singular, ultra
ultra marathon.
marathon.
Okay,
I did
even
150 miler. And actually, and that's pretty insignificant because when I lined up for that, I'm not even gonna let you ask a question.
okay,
I
go.
remember getting to the spot, getting in line, there's a line of like 50 people in front of me. And I'm nervous. I'd never done something like this before. The most I had ever run in training might have been like 30, 35, something like that in training for the 50. And but I remember getting this line, and then I'm looking ahead, and I see there's 100 miler and a 50 miler, and I look ahead, and I see the line for the 50 miler like sign in was like one or two people, and I was in the line for the 100 mile race where you had like 30 or 40 people waiting to sign up. So I had to be the one to get out of the 100 mile line and walk past all the 100 milers to do the little pansy 50 miler one. Yeah.
Was that just a decision that you made to at like
Oh,
last
yeah.
minute?
Well,
Or?
yes, it was a decision, but I had registered for the 50 miler.
Oh,
I did not, nor have I. I don't know that I'll ever do 100 miler. There's a lot of people that do way more significant runs. But I would argue the 50 miler is the beginning to endurance running. Maybe the 50K, which is a 32 miler, or is that 31? No, it's a 50K would be a 31 miler. But I think that's kind of the beginning of what you call ultra running. But there's people like Dean Karnazes is a good example. He's probably the most popular ultra runner that has done some outrageous events. He's got a great book. I don't remember the name of it, but Dean Karnazes, ultra runner. Oh, it's Ultra Marathon Man. That's what it's called. Yeah, really, really entertaining book. Very Forrest Gump esque, where one day he comes home from work and he's pissed off at himself because all he does is sit on the couch, and he is depressed one night and gets up off the couch in his boxers, puts on some old running shoes, and just ran till morning.
really?
That's how he got started. Just got fed up with himself, goes outside and just ran for a few hours. I'm sure it was slow and walking, but he was just fed up with himself and decided, I'm done. I'm just got to go do something.
It sounds a little like. Have you ever read David Goggins' book?
No, but I know who he is.
Can't Hurt Me is the name of it, and he was sort of similar. I'm not sure what Dean's life's background was. David's wasn't that good, but he, I think he ran 100-mile ultra marathon without training. Like that, he just said, yeah, it was crazy.
That's weird and almost hard to comprehend because there's points in these kinds of runs where, especially if you're undertrained, there's points in these runs where there's two elements to it. One is the muscular element, and the other is actually the physical. Everybody says it's in the head. Yes, there's an element that's psychological too, so maybe three elements to it. I'm not talking about the psychological part. The physical training, the muscular part, is really important because you could easily get to a point where your muscles just like, fuck you, I'm done. Like,
Just out, yeah.
You cannot take another step without your legs cramping up so much, or just having so much pain from being ripped apart. Every time you use the muscle, it's just ripping the fabric of the muscle. So I struggle. I'm not saying he's lying, but I don't think there's very, very many people that could just go out and run 100 miles, no matter how slow. And then there's the other element, which is the just pure physical side. Like if you're not trained to see how your feet are going to react to things. I remember I mistakenly, we were going through, it was an overnight run, this 50. So we started around 7 p.m. and I finished around 5:30 in the morning. And, but I remember running through mud and your foot gets you're at some points shin deep in mud and water and gross stuff, and you have to wade through streams at points. And if you're not familiar with the concepts of using like Body Glide, it's like a Vaseline, or in my case, what I didn't have were, I forgot what they're called, like spats for your shoes, or basically things to protect so mud doesn't get inside your shoe.
Okay.
I was wearing these short socks. Mud got inside of there, and at 25 miles, I noticed each of my Achilles were bleeding, like nasty, just from sandpaper. The mud on your Achilles, and that was probably the worst part of the race. So I had another 25 miles to run with bloody Achilles that were just grinding against the mud. Oh my God, that was the most painful shower I've ever taken after that race. So my point being, like, good for him, but that's not something that I can see very many people being able to accomplish.
Yeah, I don't think there are many people who can accomplish it. And it didn't go well for him. I mean, he finished, but some of the things that you're talking about were, he was in very bad shape after having finished. But
I'm gonna have to read that. What's the name of his book?
It's called Can't Hurt Me. It's really it's a really great book. He basically goes from where he's an exterminator eating fast food all day long, and he becomes a SEAL.
Yeah, wasn't he like 300 pounds or something? Like,
yeah, right.
Quite heavy.
Yeah, I mean, he calls it callousing your mind. That's one of his concepts, that you can. So he does. I think he attributes more to the mind maybe than you do, but he. That's one of the big themes in the book is, you can always go further than you think you can.
Totally agree with that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the key to endurance, I think. I describe all three of my kids are runners. And I don't know if they'll be lifelong runners, but they've done some running and cross country and track in high school and stuff. And so I don't know what their future holds. It's up to them. It's their book, their journey. I keep telling myself that. And actually, it's brain fart. I forgot where I was going with this, but I don't know. Let's go on. Something about the running and the mindset. I'm sure it'll come back.
We can come back to it when you remember, because I'm sure you will.
I think I got going onto my kids and started thinking about my kids and how we try to shape them and structure them, and then boom, it's all gone. But it was something around endurance and I got it. Sorry. It was, so I tell my kids that what makes a good runner is not the most skilled. It's the one that can endure discomfort for the longest period of time. So, when you go to the dentist and they're working, whatever they're doing, they're in your mouth. It's really uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Whoever can endure that for the longest period of time is going to make a really good runner. And that doesn't make running sound very fun. And I always say, and I don't know if this is completely true, but I always say nobody actually likes running. People like having run.
I've heard
so
that.
No, that's not completely true. But so that's what I tell my kids about endurance is endurance sports and activities can bring great satisfaction, like incredible satisfaction, and it can be really good for you. But to a certain degree, what makes you really good at it is your ability to endure discomfort. And same with entrepreneurship. Like, it's really frustrating. It's uncomfortable being an entrepreneur for a long period of time, but enduring discomfort is a key. And I think that's maybe David Goggins' point, is that the mind does play an important part in that piece of it. But I don't think that's about race day. I actually think that's more about training than it is about race day. And that's where I don't think on race day, the mind is as important as in training. That's where I might disagree with David Goggins.
Okay. So I want to switch gears and talk about your involvement with EO for a little bit, because I
can't remember. Are you an EO?
I am not.
You're in
Vistage,
right?
YPO.
Oh, YPO.
YPO. I was in this organization called Strategic Coach for.
Dan Sullivan. Yeah. Awesome.
Vistage. I'm in Vistage, but I guess the point is, how oftentimes we need help. As an entrepreneur, you need help because you just don't know everything, and the people that are in your organization don't know everything that you need to know or want to know or whatever. And so you reach out or you join these other groups. And you joined EO at some point, and I'm wondering, what was the reason? What were you looking for when you joined, and what did it do for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I joined, I think I joined like 10 years ago, give or take. I don't remember why I joined, to be honest. I think I just saw a group. I really like thinking about the business, and as opposed to, the more tactical, just going to work and doing my emails and crunching away. I really like thinking strategically about the business. About 10 years ago, I found this EO. I forgot how I bumped into it. And so I think I joined because I found a bunch of people that I could talk to that might be able to share ideas, and I could also share ideas with them about this process of building a business. And so at that point, 10 years ago, I was about 10 years into my first business. So at this point, it was pretty mature for a business, but I was still in growth mode, trying to figure a lot of stuff out, even 10 years into it. And that's why I joined. I think what I learned, interestingly, was about myself. I did not have a good experience joining EO the first time. And this goes back to my insecurities, man. I don't know why I struggle with this stuff. Maybe I do need to go back to the Pembroke Psychiatric Hospital.
Yeah.
But I do. I am an extrovert, but I also find myself very intimidated by groups of people sometimes, which kind of goes. It doesn't make sense. And
groups of strangers or groups of people that you, even if you know them, it's or setting.
No, I feel great with people I know. It's groups of strangers, I think. Okay. So I go to this EO thing, and there's all these people that are pretty confident, and they've already built these great businesses. I just don't feel like I've done, I don't feel like I can compete. I can't compare myself to them. And so I'm even my small group forum, I just didn't feel like I was one of them. Okay. It's a little bit of the imposter syndrome. Like, I don't deserve to be here. These people have got like real businesses. At this point, I don't even think I felt like I had a real business, which was ridiculous looking back on it. And so, to be honest, I quit 2 years later, and I got my partner into it at the time down in Atlanta. Again, I'm in Boston. He's in Atlanta, and I got my partner at the time into it. And I kept seeing all the cool things he was doing, and he had a much better attitude. He went into it like arms open to everybody, and he killed it. He did great. And so I watched the way he did, and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go back and try again. So I joined again. And the second time around, it was awesome. It was a completely different experience for me. I went in with my arms open, much more open attitude towards people. And I found some really good friends, and now it's an organization that I feel very, very comfortable in. I feel fine being a goofball at events and being silly, and so that's, I think what I learned about EO is more about myself than about the business, actually.
There's another parallel between us there, because when I started joining these organizations, and I have tried my best not to for a long time, because for two reasons. One, I was scared to do it.
Yeah.
And two,
hold on. What were you scared of?
I was scared of being around other people.
Yeah, I know, man. And I'm an extrovert, and I still feel that way.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was one reason. The second reason was I had this mentality that if I didn't know something, I could figure it out and do it. And I would, you were talking before about having a team that does everything. The things that they can do things better, as good as you or better, let them do it. And I had some of that, but I was still holding on to a lot of, it's weak of me to give up on learning this thing or that. So those were the two things. And then when I got in, I was like the guy who stood against the wall, Dave. It was hard to get me to talk, and it took months and months and months for me to get comfortable. And I think everybody probably thought I was really weird because, you're there for a purpose, which is to help yourself and to help everyone else. That's the purpose of being there. And I just thought every time I opened my mouth, I was, demonstrating to everyone that I wasn't supposed to be in the room. And I still feel that way a lot of times when I go to places. I don't know. I don't know why, but it's just hard. And
so that's interesting to me because you're whatever these insecurities are, they didn't keep you from achieving something great. And on the other side of the spectrum, when you're in a room where you're very, very comfortable with people and you see somebody standing against the wall, our natural inclination is to kind of ignore them, right? Maybe go talk to them for a minute and then get out of that conversation as quickly as possible. Like oftentimes, not everybody, but oftentimes we might go welcome them into the group, shake their hands, but we're going to get out of that conversation pretty quickly. Go back with our drinking buddies or whatever it is that we're doing that's more fun. But think about what they missed. And you won't say this, but I will. Think about anybody who did that, think about what they missed by not talking to you. I mean, how much value and how much you've accomplished. And if they skirt over that and try to get past that, they're going to miss this amazing story that you have to tell. So it's a lesson for both of us. Number one, to go into a group with open arms. And number two, to find those people whose arms are closed and try to get them open.
Yeah.
We have a lot to learn from each other.
That's great advice.
Same with employees, right? Like you get a lot of employees. I found that some of my employees that stand against the wall are eventually evolve into some of my best teammates. They're some of the best employees but you got to pull them out.
Yeah. They're just looking for you to take them by the hand and walk them through the door. Well, let's talk podcasts a little bit, if you don't mind.
No, let's do it.
So your podcast is affiliated with EO, so it's called EO 360. And mine is not affiliated with anybody. It's just something I decided on I wouldn't say a whim. I decided sort of on a whim to start it. So it's similar in that we have discussions with really interesting people and satisfy, each other's curiosity, maybe first and foremost before anything else. But how did you get yours off the ground, and what do you like doing? What do you like about it and like doing it for?
Well, I got off the ground because EO was a client of Peach New Media back in the day, and then they stopped being a client of ours, and I wanted to know more because I was a member too. I was like, guys, you need us. What are you going to do without us? Because it was all about online learning. And they said, well, we got plans. If you want to be a part of it, why don't you join our virtual learning committee? So I did. I joined the virtual learning committee as a volunteer. First 5 minutes in there, like, hey, Dave, good to meet you. Glad you're here. Do you know anything about podcasting? And that was kind of my introduction to it. And I knew a little, not how to do it, but I listened to some at that point. And so we figured it out together. So what I like about it is it's like a key to talking to people that I normally wouldn't talk to. I get to talk to people and hear some amazing stories like yours and like the billionaires that I've talked to. And I mean, that's amazing to create a net worth of $1 billion. And so it's so cool to hear the stories of these people that think so big, and to hear stories from a world-class big wave surfer that I just interviewed recently, and to talk to the founder of Priceline, one of the two founders of Priceline, and to talk to a guy about Facebook who is at Facebook as the CIO in the crux of their growth from 2010 to 2016. I mean, these are people that I don't think I would have access to normally, and I meet them through connections I've made as a result of this role. What I don't like about it is, it's EO's podcast. I mean, I do it. I'm the host. I enjoy it. I kind of reap a lot of the rewards of it, but EO owns it. I would love to eventually, maybe after PropFuel, my current company, I would love to can like, do what you're doing. I kind of like the idea of creating a medium, or not a medium, but creating a channel on a medium where I think this is the new version of books. So many people write books, and they're all bestsellers, right? I think podcasting is the new medium of books. It's the new way for the average person to tell a story and to get something out there. So that's what I'd like to do. And right now, if I ever do that on my own, I have to start from scratch. I can't utilize one of the 150 or so episodes that we've done with EO.
But you could, people come on your podcast because of you, I think.
Yeah, I could rebuild it. I could rebuild the list. It's just, I've got right now, 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 years of invested into that, and I don't own it. It's kind of like renting versus owning,
Yeah. Oh, good. That's a good way to put it. So with your new company, PropFuel, right?
Yeah.
So you're on your pursuit to transition from lifelong to FU money, it sounds like.
Yes, I am. Yep. It's actually, and I mean that sincerely. This idea, this business, it's more than an idea. I mean, we got lots of paying customers, so we're well into the business. But it's a significantly grander idea than what I had built before. Okay. And by design. And it was actually the first one I built, I needed to get money on the table. So we did anything we could to get money on the table. This one was done differently. This one was built to be a scalable platform. And so from day one, we knew we weren't going to make money in the first year. And I have a partner in this who we started it together. And I hope we sell it together. But this one we started knowing we weren't going to make money probably for at least the first year. And I couldn't have done that in my first business. So we built this with a much different mentality. But this one we're building this to sell. Okay. And we're having a great time doing it. And I don't want to sell too soon, but we are I'm not going to hand this off to our kids. This is the kind of business we are building this to create value for our customers. So much value that we get more and more customers so that it creates this immense value. And so that's kind of my goal to build this to a point where it's a ridiculous sale. It's fun too. And I don't know if it'll happen. Well, actually, I'm pretty darn confident it's going to happen. I have very little doubt that we're going to get there. And the reason is because I've got the endurance. That's all it is, man. It's just the endurance to keep it going until you figure out the right turns and the right corners. I mean, we're in a maze, right? That's what entrepreneurship is. It's a maze. You got to figure out, where do I turn and where do I keep going? And, you're figuring out those lefts and rights to figure out product market fit. That's really the key of it, the product market fit, and then how to scale that when you find it. It's a game. It's a heck of a lot of fun too. And some of us are better at doing it faster than others. I just happen to be one of the slower endurance runners. Let's put it that way.
Another thing that we have in common, and I actually do walk slowly. So most
literally, you walk slower
most of the time.
Yeah,
most of the time.
That's the beauty of being semi-retired now, huh? Do you wear a watch, Mike?
Maybe.
Do you wear? Tell me, do you wear a watch?
I don't wear a watch, no.
Okay, there you go. But thank you very much.
Well,
I still wear a watch.
Phone's a watch, so I can't really say. I don't keep track of time. Mm-hmm. But if it makes you feel good to say that I don't wear a watch and you do, then that's okay with me.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your stories. You definitely sound like a guy who has not just the endurance and the talent, but someone who figures stuff out too. And I really do enjoy your podcast a lot, and I enjoy you even more. So,
Thanks.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. Like you said earlier, when you were on my podcast, you enjoyed talking about it. It's who's going to decline the opportunity to talk about themselves for an hour? It is fun to have somebody ask these questions and to think through your past, and it doesn't happen very often. So when it does, it's nice it's almost like looking through an old photo album. So thanks for letting me do that.
I'm glad we got the chance.
All right, brother. Thanks very much.
Okay. Take it easy. Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.